All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. I have Lauren Elaine back for this week's chat, and she has something on top of mind because she's kind of dealing with this right now. But our topic today is going to be how to select contractors that you're going to work with. So, welcome back, Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. So, why don't you kind of talk about what you're dealing with? Because you kind of said this is kind of top of mind for you right now and what you're working on.
Yeah, I've had a lot of experience vetting contractors or subcontractors, and also being a female is a little bit different of an experience. But right now, I have a contractor who's been doing some paddock repair on one of my equestrian properties, and they've had to redo the work twice because they've brought in the wrong fill, and this latest batch of fill had nails, carpet, all sorts of random things inside of it. And it's supposed to be really clean virgin dirt. So what's really important is making sure that people who are doing work on your property are licensed, bonded, and insured. That's like my number one point of advice, because this probably will end up being an insurance claim for him. He gets to decide whether he wants to do that or not. But if they lose enough money on the job, they might make an insurance claim. And I've just had a lot of different experiences. One time I built a barn, and the contractors who did that barn turned out to be stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars from a lot of different people in the community. And I was one of their first clients, and they had incredible five-star reviews online from lots of different people. They seemed very reputable. They seemed like they had great connections. And it turned out that that was all kind of fake. So even if somebody has like five-star Google reviews, you still want to make sure that they're insured, licensed, and bonded, because that turned out to be an insurance claim on that. And because I was one of the first ones, I did get paid out for that. But the people that were later in the process, they were out of money by the time it got to them. And I know one woman who lost $165,000 that she had given them to build this outdoor covered arena. And she probably just won't ever get that money back because they went bankrupt.
Wow. So it sounds like, you use reviews or Google reviews to find contractors or people to work with. Is there anything, other tools, you can recommend or that you've used to find your contractors?
I mean, word of mouth is the best, because you know somebody that they've worked for and they've done a good job. There's nothing, I think, higher and best than word of mouth. If you can find someone who says can vouch for them, and you know that person, and that person is somebody that you trust. And if you don't know the person and they've recommended someone, then you have to question it. You have to vet the sources of people that you're taking recommendations from. But yeah, I think word of mouth is the best. I found the best people that way. And then starting small, if you can, doing some small part of a job. I've hired on our first conversation, I told you I got $5,000 stolen from me from a contractor that I hired. And that was the lesson that I learned on that job. Was I had hired him to do the entire job. And so I had given him a higher down payment. But if I had just come in and said, I essentially want you to do this entire job, but first I want to make sure that we work well together, and let's start small, and we'll have a really clear scope of work. So lined out exactly what they're going to do, what your expectations are of what the finishes are going to look like, and how the quality of work is going to be, and never pay them up front, pay them in increments as the job gets done, so that you aren't ever out of that money. And then it really is trial and error, because it's just inevitable that at some point someone's going to do a bad job, and you just have to budget for that.
Totally agree. I don't know if I talked about it on our first conversation also, but so I invest, remotely from Hawaii to Pittsburgh. And kind of people always ask me, like, how did I choose Pittsburgh or why did I start in Pittsburgh? And my story always goes back to it's more my friend was investing there and he actually made a lot of mistakes in the beginning. And I'm sure he doesn't like me always reminding him of it. But, like you just kind of touched on where you had a contractor, walk away with money or steal money from you. And that kind of happened to my friend. So for me, when I was looking at a market or if I was going to actually even do this, I felt a little more comfortable because he actually made mistakes or, unfortunately, the contractor walked away with his money, but now he started maybe doing more due diligence on who he was going to work with and, connecting with property managers and things like that. So, do you have any experience like being remote? Because I know you do have a property in Maui, like as far as dealing with contractors or finding people remotely.
Yeah, so I always go on. I mean, I invest in places where I have connections and I know people. So that really helps. And like you said with your friend, choosing somebody who has had experience there and asking them for recommendations is a really good idea.
Yeah, I think that's, for me, the challenge is, and I think that's why some people look at remote investing as kind of a challenge, is that you don't get to meet face to face with a lot of these individuals. So for me, and I haven't done like any, I mean, big rehabs, but I actually rely a lot on my property manager right now. And so that's part of it too. Is I'm trusting verifying my property manager and his connections and same thing, his referrals. And the other thing too is I get in a lot of these investor groups. So, Pittsburgh, talk to other investors. And I think that's super important is getting these connections in that market so you can see who these people work with or people that are doing rehabs in those markets and get their referrals. So that's what I like to do.
Yeah, it's always best to learn from other people's mistakes. If you that can save you a lot of headaches.
Yeah. So as far as, so I guess right now, I mean, do you kind of have, you would say maybe kind of like a dedicated team that you work with, or you're still kind of looking for different people to do certain projects?
No, I do pretty much at this point have a dedicated team, but at the same time, sometimes the people that work for me end up getting too busy because I use subcontractors. So I try to pay them really well. I try to be really like on time with when the job's going to start, when it's going to finish so that they know they can rely on me. And then I just make sure that I'm always paying them on time. And that's how I keep the good people. But inevitably the good people get busy or they change or they move. So it's always constantly finding new people, but I do have a really solid group of people that I trust. And like you, and I network a lot. So I'm always asking people in my network, do you know somebody who does this or does that? And we share connections. And so I get really high quality individuals now because I associate with other real estate investors who I know are doing high quality work.
So, I hear kind of different sides to this. So maybe what's your thought on getting multiple bids? Because I feel like I understand why you want to get multiple bids. However, maybe like if you're just getting started or you're new to a market, it's hard to get multiple bids because now these people may not want to work with you because it's like you're wasting, not necessarily wasting their time, but you're making them come out, get bids for you, quotes for you, and then you may not even use them as a contractor. So what's your thoughts on that?
I mean, I think it's okay to get bids if you haven't worked with them before. It's an opportunity to like see what their knowledge and experience is. And if you're starting out, you should get multiple bids just to know what things are going to cost. But going with the cheapest bid is not always the right decision. So it's good to get multiple bids if you're starting out, but at this point, I don't really get multiple bids on things because I know who I'm going to work with. I'm choosing to work with that person I know from a recommendation that they're going to be fair on their price and that they're going to do a good job. So if you are tight, really tight on your budget, then maybe it's a good idea to consider, but it can end up costing a lot more if you go with just like the cheapest person.
Totally agree. Yeah, I think you can lose a lot of money by going cheap, and I think it's like you're saying, get especially in the beginning, you want to get some bids, so like you're saying, get a better knowledge of what you might be paying for things. But I think once you kind of find, and that's why maybe you have a good team right now. Once you kind of find these people that you want to work with on a regular basis, sometimes I don't really want to hassle them as far as like you know
Yeah.
get me these quotes. And so I kind of trust them, but yet you still want to verify. But at the same time, I want this smooth relationship where they know that, like you're saying, I'm going to pay them, they're going to give me quality work, and it's kind of just this back and forth relationship.
Yeah. And a lot of my contractors, I don't even have to have them come out. I'll send them pictures and square footage of the job so they can get an idea and they'll give me a rough estimate bid if I'm curious of, if I'm gonna do it one way or another. And I'm trying to debate on, whether I'm gonna do LVP or tile and what the cost difference is. I'll reach out to them and say, hey, can you give me a bid if I did this square footage of LVP versus tile, what that would cost or something. So if you have a good relationship, you can kind of text them. They don't have to come out for every single job, but there has to be that trust there already.
That's another good point you just touched on. I think like the text messaging or even just communication, clear communication,
Yeah.
whether, kind of upfront, are you okay text messaging? Are you okay with emails, or how are we going to communicate? I think that's super important because sometimes people just want to do strictly email, and, you're texting them and you may not get a response. And on your end, you're like, well, what's going on? I want to know more. But I think having that upfront on how you're going to communicate is super important.
Yeah. I mean, I ask everybody that honestly, like even if it's your contractor or you're just a friend, I'm like, how do you like to communicate? Do you like text message? Do you like email? Do you like phone calls? Because I think it's more of effective communication or just like a respect thing where I'm like, I want to communicate in the way that is best for you.
So, kind of going back a little bit as far as when you first meet the contractors, do you have like a checklist you go through? Like, do you interview them in the beginning when you're going to first work with them? Do you kind of have this standard process you might go through?
I I definitely interview them. I don't know if I have like a standard process because I feel like every job is so different and the needs are so different on every single one, but I definitely ask them what they would do in this situation without giving my input first. I'm like, I want to hear what their ideas are, if they are creative, if they know what they're talking about, like I like to get an idea of their experience level through just letting them talk and listening. And then I tell them like what my expectations are. And I try to be really clear. I over communicate that I'm a perfectionist. I may come in and change my mind, but I'm going to pay you for that. So I set the expectations. So I just try to set expectations of like what I'm going to expect out of them and like the level of quality. And I tell them like I'm a perfectionist. I want it to look like this. I bring pictures and samples of like the level of quality that I'm looking for so that they can actually see it. And I over communicate that I am expecting a certain level of work, or, I may change my mind, or I could, but they'll be compensated for it. But I let them know that this is the time frame and this is the expectation. And then I put that out there beforehand so that they know they don't come back and say, oh, I didn't know it was going to be this. You wanted this level of work. So I try to just really over communicate in the beginning what I'm looking for. And that comes through experience too, just having done it before.
You touched on something very important, I think, and it's about, I think, what people are going to have a lot of struggle with sometimes is how, like you said, and I know people just like you, that you're saying you're a perfectionist. And I think, especially if do these, you invest remotely or at a distance, as far as not being there to maybe actually see the project or be hands-on with it. So how do you deal with that?
Mm, if you're going to be remote, you definitely need somebody who can come and check on things for you. I think that's a must. If you, like you said, you have a property manager, if you have a property manager, I would even just pay another contractor. Maybe he's not available to do the work, but he could come and just have eyes on the job, because you could have somebody who's saying they're getting the work done and sending you pictures and it's not even your job. And maybe you can't tell from the photos. I mean, there's a lot that can be missed in a photo. So You definitely, I would say, have eyes on the ground of someone. If you don't have somebody that you completely trust. If you have a contractor or somebody doing the work that you trust implicitly, then that's another story. But if you're just getting started, I would find a third party to come and look at the job.
And I forget, in your portfolio, do you have any long-term rental ones, or is it mainly, like you say, the
Um,
equestrian farm and Airbnb?
I mostly have short-term and mid-term,
Okay.
but the Maui property is long-term.
Okay, but have you done? I'm kind of just thinking as far as like like you're saying you're a perfectionist, and I can see like you're saying the midterm, short term. There's a little more creativity possibly going into the renovations or rehab. Where like a long term, it's finding that balance where you're not going to be living there, and how much do you
Yeah.
actually want to spend on it? So have you had any experience with that as far as having to
Yeah,
make that decision?
I've done some flip properties. So flipping is very much that line of like, you want it to be nice because you want people to love it and buy it, but you also don't want to go so high end that you go over budget. So there's definitely a fine line, but I think that quality of work speaks to a lot more than just choosing like a more expensive tile or more expensive finishes. I think if something's done really well, that it can look really sharp and look really good.
And with anything, it comes with experience, right? I'm sure like now you have an idea what commands more money or more value, right? As far as
Yes.
finishes and whatnot.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right.
With
Well,
the flips, it's usually kind of like, in a way, more plain, like simple, something that's just really clean is more effective than something that's more cool in the design. In Airbnb, maybe you want something that stands out in a picture and it's unique, but in a flip, you want something that's more generic and clean looking.
I love it. Well, this was a great topic. I'm glad, there was something top of mind for you and you had a lot of good nuggets on this one. But if anyone wants to reach out because they want to hear how vet a contractor or maybe some of the questions that you might ask them, how can they connect with you?
On Instagram at Lauren Elaine 8 show. Or no, Lauren Elaine show. Sorry, that was my personal one. You can find me there too, but Lauren
Well,
Elaine show.
might have to go over that too at one point. What is the show part for? What is, but we can cover that.
It's just for me,
Oh,
it's just like, oh, showing my work or just showing
oh,
you
okay.
kind of the things that I'm doing.
Thought there was like a TV show involved or something at some point.
I Have you seen my Instagram? There's a TV show coming out of there.
All right. Well, this is always fun. So thanks for doing this again, and we'll do it again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Lauren. Bye.